Good morning, everyone. Okay. When I was a child, I used to always try and make sense out of everything around me. So I was that kid who asked about 400 to 500 questions a day and made everyone insane. And when I was not offered an explanation that I was convinced with or an explanation that I understood, I would just make up an explanation and believe that, like most kids do. So one of the things that I used to wonder about was how a traffic light works. So I asked my parents, Mom, Dad, how does a traffic light work? And they said, sweetie, it's just automated. It works on its own. But if you tell a 5-year-old that something is automated and works on its own, they probably would not really understand that. So what do? I make up an explanation that there is a very skinny man. He's so skinny. He's trapped inside the pole of a traffic light with a tiny remote that has the colors red, green, and yellow. And he used to actually manually operate the traffic light. And he used to be so anxious and so stressed out because if he made a mistake, then all of the cars would crash into each other. So every time we stopped at a traffic light, I used to get stressed out because the man inside the traffic light is stressed out, and I was feeling his stress. And that was when I was 5, but now I'm 21, and I drive, and I still get so stressed out at the traffic light because I can feel his stress, you know? And another thing that I used to wholeheartedly believe in was that, do you ever laugh so much that your laugh goes mute, and then you just sit there, and your whole face becomes frozen because your laugh is muted, but you're still making a laughing face, so you just sit there and look sort of stupid. But then there is a tiny, tiny voice coming from the bottom of your throat. And that voice is like a tiny dwarf that is trying to give you that after laugh. It's the voice of that dwarf that lives in your throat. Because he wants to save you the embarrassment of looking stupid with a mute laughing face. So that dwarf is a very nice dwarf. And I think all of you have it. You should thank that dwarf next time you laugh so hard. Another thing that I used to believe in was that under every fountain, there is a whale. And the whale would sprout the water that comes out of the fountain. So I used to actually believe that when I'm standing next to a fountain, I'd get so excited because there's a whale right under me. But if I come to the fountain the next week and it's not working, I get so sad because the whale probably went to another fountain to operate it. So I think that would be scary if there are whales under us right now. That would be very scary. So I used to be that kid who always, every single night, demanded a long, elaborate, very detailed bedtime story, full of plot twists, not one climax. I want 10 climaxes. I want 100 characters in the story. And of course, my mom had to do that. And my mom was a working mom, so probably 15 minutes into the story, she would be asleep. But 2 hours later, I'd still be awake, trying to make up characters and adding it to that story. So I was that kid who slept last at home, woke up first thing in the morning, went to school and draw all the characters that I thought of before I went to sleep. So this tendency to use my imagination to try and explain everything around me never really stopped. It started when I was young, and it still goes on until today. And at some point in my life, there started to appear a character in my head, sort of like an alter ego. And she was a queen of a queendom. Yes, a queendom, not a kingdom, because there is no word in the English language that describes an empire ruled by a female, which sort of makes me sad, so I just made a word up, and I named it queendom. Her name was Queen Shush. Shush was my nickname when I was young. And I'm not sure when this character started to appear, but at some point in my life, I think I just irritated my friend and started fighting with her. And she was like, listen, who do you think you are, queen of the world? And I'm like, maybe I am queen of the world. I'm like, yes, I am. You know what? I am queen of the world. And it dawned on me one day like an epiphany. You know that when the halo appears behind your head, and you know that this is what you're always meant for? And I'm like, yes, I am the queen of the world. At least in my head, I am the queen of the world. So I'm a separate person, and Queen Shush is another person in my head. And I started to imagine all the details that are related to Queen Shush. So for example, I'd imagine how her palace looks like, the interiors of her palace. Even her cutlery is different than normal people cutlery. She uses different forks, different knives. And she even has her own wardrobe and her own dresses. And I used to always draw her dresses. And I'd like to show you a dress that was actually inspired by the story. So I made this dress where it has the queen and all her solar system. And this is the friend that got irritated by me. Thank you. You are dismissed. And so I used to actually create fictional equivalents to the people in my life, in my kingdom. So my sister, who I always fight with, was actually the evil sister in my kingdom who wanted to take over Queen Shush's throne. And my relationship with you in real life would actually dictate how I treat you in my kingdom. So, I mean, queendom. So, let's say you give me a compliment in real life. I'd be mentally showering your fictional character with gifts. I'd be signing off on treasures to send to you. I'd give you an island. You know, I have a whole queendom. Might as well give you an island. So as you can see, that Queen Shush is a very easy person. If you just compliment me, I give you an island. So that's cool. You all give me compliments after this talk. And if you, for example, bash my favorite movie, then guess what? Mentally, I'd be just throwing you in a dungeon, putting on Teletubbies on full volume, on repeat, and imagining how much you're suffering watching that. So I never concerned myself with you. So you bash my favorite movie, and I'm like, okay, you're watching Teletubbies. I'm so much better than you right now. So as you can imagine, life became more entertaining as much as Queen Shush was present in my mind. While most people would be walking into a waiting room or lining up in a queue, and they would be thinking, man, I don't want to spend the next hour waiting here. Or they'd want time to pass faster. But when I walk into a waiting room, I walk in and say, oh my God, look at all this material. Look at all these strangers that I can actually include in my queendom. And I can dress up as much as I want, and I can imagine their lives. So if I'm in a waiting room and, for example, some woman is sitting next to me scrolling on Instagram looking at pictures of food, all I'd be thinking is that she's probably a chef in my kingdom. She's probably thinking about making this at home today. And I just assign her that role. And suddenly the woman next to me isn't a stranger, but she's a character in my kingdom. And while I'm queuing up for coffee in Starbucks, I'd be looking at the Starbucks barista making my coffee, and I'd be thinking, man, this guy is a potion mixer. He's actually making the elixir of life. After I drink this coffee, I'm going to be such a magical person. And I think everyone here who drinks coffee would agree that coffee is magical. And all you non-coffee drinkers, just stay in your lane. I also used to not believe in taking exams and tests and quizzes, which I used to have to do for most of my academic life, like most of us have to. And I used to sit in an exam and I'd be thinking, you know, I'm a queen, I shouldn't be doing this. I'm not meant to just spend my time, you know, just writing this test. So I decided that I needed to change my perspective on exams and tests because I had to do 3 of them a day. And I convinced myself to sit happily in an exam or test by imagining that since every institution in the world needs a quality control check, even the queendom needs a quality control check. And what better way to have quality control checks other than make the queen take these tests? So the queen cannot fail in a test. The queen cannot get less than an A in a test. So that's the only way that I convinced myself to sit in every test and get straight A's all through high school, all through university. And I never ever, or rarely ever, get mad or lose my cool over something. And usually when all my friends would get mad at something, they'd get mad at something that happened to me, and I'd be the chillest person in the room. And they're like, why aren't you mad? But what they don't know is, in my mind, I'm like, I'm a queen. I need to keep my composure. If I lose control, then the whole kingdom loses control. So that's the only way I actually managed to convince myself to keep my cool in so many situations where every one of my friends got really mad. But are there any instances in the kingdom, or in the queendom, I'm sorry, where chaos strikes, or for example, a war happens, or a natural disaster, perhaps? Well, there are plenty of times where things can go wrong in the queendom. Like any other country in the world or any other queendom, something has to go wrong. A few years ago, I started having anxiety. It was panic attack after panic attack after panic attack. And what really confused me and baffled me about having anxiety was the kind of person you start to become. So I started going from a person who would so confidently stand in front of 300 people and act a role in a play, to someone who cannot even order a coffee without having crippling anxiety and self-doubt. And I'd always shut myself away from people. I'd go for the minimum social interaction required. But how? How did that even happen? I was the person in my group of friends who you would go to for motivational talks. But then I was the person in my group of friends who couldn't even have a single positive thought to get her through the day. I used to be the artist who filled a whole sketchbook in a week. A whole sketchbook, over 100 pages. But then I became the artist who only managed to draw a single sketch in 5 months. The queendom was disappearing from my mind. Queen Shush felt like she was mourning me. It's like she was saying goodbye to me, because I'm not the same person anymore because of my anxiety. And suddenly another Shush appeared, but she was not a queen. She was called Shadow Shush. Shadow Shush is a very bad person. She used to tell me that I was stupid, that I was ugly, that I couldn't do what I want to do, that I couldn't achieve my dreams, and that I wasn't deserving of the things that I had in life. She was a constant radio of negativity, of self-criticism. She destroyed me. And when I hit rock bottom, something told me that the only way to combat this anxiety was to take out some charcoal, some black paint, and start painting the walls of my room. And who's the first figure that appeared when I actually started drawing? 5 months after not drawing? It was Queen Shush. She came back, and suddenly drawing became the portal between me and Queen Shush. It's like the entrance between my world and her world. And she was starting to come back to me, and the confidence was starting to come back to me. And suddenly rock bottom wasn't such a bad place. Rock bottom is actually a cool place in my kingdom if you want to visit it one day. So after I finished drawing on my wall, I realized that I went from a person who used to draw on sketchbooks this big or this big to a person who can only draw on walls. Okay. And more walls, and more Queen Shush. And then she didn't even have a queendom anymore. She had a whole solar system. Why not? If you can make your own planets, just expand your solar system. And then I started drawing on floors as well. So this was a 7-meter space, so about from here until the podium. Just a drawing on the ground of my solar system. So had I not hit my lowest point of anxiety, I would never have discovered my potential. Sometimes for us to grow, we must break because our capabilities are much larger than us. So I stand here in front of you, my wonderful subjects, and I urge you and invite you to discover the side of yourselves that you have never discovered. To look into yourselves for that child that never actually grew up, but you just forgot about. Because that child has the solutions to your everyday problems. That child can actually change your perspectives about things you thought are obstacles. And you know this very well, because every time you talk to a kid, you feel a lot better. But what you don't know is that kid is right here. Thank you, everyone.